Do you know why most personal finance experts never talk about earning more?
Because they don't know what they're talking about?
They don't know how.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that. That's why this is a whole part of the equation is missing in money. All they talk about is cutting back. I'm like, what about the other side of the table? You can earn more.
Ramit Sethi is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. A book that I read 10 years ago that helped me climb my way out of 6 figures of student loan debt. I was honored to have the chance to sit down with him to talk about how to earn more money, create healthy spending habits, and how to change the way we've been thinking about money for our entire lives. I hope you get as much out of this conversation as I did.
I'll give you the pronunciation of my last name.
I got it.
You did?
No, I know it.
How'd you know that?
Is it Sethi?
Sethi, yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, man, I know
That's
that.
all right.
I was like, stop.
that was impressive.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the time it's wrong, and it's like nobody's
Sethi.
fault.
Yeah. Why don't you just start out, give me like a little bit of an introduction to the kind of work you're doing right now and what you've been up to lately.
Sure. My name's Ramit Sethi, and I decided years ago to take my college scholarship money and invest it in the stock market because I thought that's what everybody was doing in 1999, 2000. I lost half my money and I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. So I started learning about money, and at the same time I was learning about psychology. And over time I basically got really interested in learning how to change my own behavior with money, with careers, and with negotiation and all kinds of parts of self-development. So I started a blog called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I was sober when I named that. I don't know if I would get the same name again. But started a blog, ended up writing a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which became an instant New York Times bestseller. And now we have 20 different courses on money, business, psychology, and careers, all different parts of living a rich life.
When I think of rich, I'm thinking mink coat, red convertible, monocle, top hat, mustache.
Yeah.
When I first read the book, was surprised not to see any of that. Maybe you can do that in the 20-year edition of the book. But when you are thinking about and talking about living a rich life or being rich, what does that really mean?
Well, it's funny you say that because so many of us have these odd preconceived notions about rich, and almost like when we were 8 years old watching Richie Rich, that TV show. And we still think that's what people do. Like, you have to stay at a certain hotel, you have to wear a chinchilla coat, which is totally ridiculous because if you start playing a game and in the back of your head you think, if I win, I actually lose. If I become rich, then I have to wear a mink coat, then you're never gonna play the game at all. And I think for people like us now, rich is about flexibility, it's about freedom, it's about being able to spend extravagantly on the things you love, but you gotta cut costs mercilessly on the things you don't. So for me, it's being able to travel 1 month per year. It's being able to hire a personal trainer. It's being able to have an awesome team around me. Other people don't care about that. They're like, I don't want a trainer. I love what my fitness regimen is. I don't need a trainer. And they might wanna have an amazing car, or they might wanna travel with their parents. Awesome. I wanted to start redefining rich because your rich life is different than mine, and that's okay.
There's a lot of people that show their wealth, and oftentimes those aren't really the wealthy people. It's the people that have the Lamborghini, or they're paying extraordinary amounts of rent on a high-end apartment or a high-end condo. What does it really look like to be rich, and what are some of the misconceptions about wealthy people?
Well, this is something I've learned over the last 20 years, and I think I will agree with you that there's a general sense where you can look at someone and think you know what their wealth status is, but I would also say that if people earn $1 million a year, or 5 million, or 10 million, and I know people at all those levels, there are some common things that they do. So for example, when you're first starting out with money, it makes perfect sense that you probably want to track what you spend for a month or two. You kind of need to know that you're making enough money more than your expenses. That's obvious. But it's very counterintuitive that the more you make, that calculus totally changes. For example, when I was starting out, I thought it was stupid to fly business class. I'm like, that's so stupid. We all get to the same place. Why would they spend triple the amount? Over time, as I became more financially comfortable, I started to realize there's a different calculus at play. Maybe I'm gonna land and I need to go straight to work. Maybe I use points, or maybe I just want to. and I have the money and it's something that I value. So that changes completely. What is really common is that people say, oh my God, if I had $1 million, I would never do that. I'm like, you have no idea what you would do if you had $1 million. The kind of people who have these big theories about what they would do are the exact kind of people that will never have $1 million. Instead, I would challenge everyone, instead of D, disparagement, get C, curious. I call it the D to C principle. Get curious. Why does somebody who has $1 million fly business class? Or why do they shop at that store? Or why do they have a trainer when they could get all these workouts from YouTube? And you might discover that people at different wealth levels value different things. That's totally okay. I used to love Taco Bell. Taco Bell's awesome. I don't really eat at Taco Bell anymore. And why? I could get full for way cheaper, but now there are different things that I value. That's okay. So I would challenge everyone to think that what you value today is probably going to be very different than what you value tomorrow. That's okay.
A lot of people online in the personal finance community like to talk about being frugal and cutting down on every possible expense. And I know this is something that you've been going out against for probably 15 years now.
15 years. I mean, how much tape do we have? I'm about to go off on this frugality stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the most classic thing is don't spend money on lattes. Okay, everyone, first of all, don't worry, everyone watching and listening, I'm not going to tell you to cut back on lattes. Buy as many lattes as you want. This is a fundamental misconception that if you cut back on $3 or $5 every single day, that somehow magically 200,000 years in the future, you're going to have enough money to live your rich life. First of all, who wants to live like that? Second of all, if you run the math, that's not even that much money anyway, $3 a day. And third, it simply doesn't work. People buy more coffee than ever. I wake up in the morning, I want coffee. What they ignore is that you can focus on 5 or 10 big wins in life. Get a good job, negotiate your salary, invest every single month automatically, make sure you have a solid credit score. Just get 5 to 10 things right. You'll never have to worry about the cost of appetizers or lattes again.
Are there some sacrifices that need to be made though? Because sure, while I love lattes, I love going out for a cup of coffee every day, and I don't want to sacrifice that, can I apply that to everything in life? Can I have it all? Or should we be focusing on maybe like, okay, I do really value this thing, so I'm willing to invest some money in it, but you know, I can't have it all.
So I would love for people to develop their sense of what they truly love and what they don't really care about. In my life, I love convenience. That's something that I call my money dial. I can turn that spending way up. So when you think about convenience for most people, maybe they have a dishwasher, maybe they send their laundry to be done, or they have somebody maybe come and help around the house once in a while. I turned it way up. I doubled, tripled, quadrupled my spending. I have a personal assistant. I wake up in the morning, my calendar's like perfectly organized. It's like my art. I love it. But my computer's 5 years old. I just don't care about it. When I bought a car, I bought a Honda Accord. Again, don't really care about that. We hardly ever eat out as a couple. We just make food at home. I think that I would challenge everyone to figure out if you want to spend extravagantly on the things you love and you cut costs mercilessly on the things you don't, what would it mean to actually be truly extravagant? Like, let me ask you, what is something that you just love spending on?
Camera gear. I mean take a look around.
Okay, so let's play this out for a second. So let's say that I handed you $50,000. What would you do with that money?
I actually wouldn't buy camera gear just because it's something that I've already invested heavily in, and I feel like I have enough of it. I think if I were to be given $50,000 right now, and I think you could even say camera gear is my dedication to my business.
Yep.
I'd probably just invest it back into my company, into my business. I'd probably hire somebody to take on some work to help make more videos with me.
Very interesting. Okay, so it sounds like convenience might be part of that, or staff. For a lot of people, if you ask them, what do you truly love spending on? There tend to be some clusters. Wellness is one, and that could be organic meat. It could be training. It could be going on a retreat to Tulum, whatever. Food, classic one. Relationships is a big one. So everyone's like, oh yeah, I value relationships. I have a buddy of mine who has a lake house and a boat, and he throws events where he will pay for everyone to come in 4 times a year, and he'll introduce people for like 4 days at a time. That guy's money dial is relationships. So the point I'm making is, ask yourself, what is the thing that I love? And what if I doubled my spending on it? Well, in order to do that, which would give you joy, you probably have to cut back on the things you don't really care about. And instead of just spending a little bit here and a little bit there, I'm a huge fan of going all in on one big thing and then saying, these things are just not important to me.
I love that just mental exercise to begin with. The fact of giving somebody $50,000 or giving somebody $1 million.
Yeah. What would you do with it?
Exactly. I think that's a huge question that not a lot of people are asking. And they're not being honest with themselves, because that's something that I asked myself. I didn't have $1 million, but it was like, okay, I did pretty well financially for a period of time where I have a bit of runway to be able to make a decision about where I want to head. And it's like, oh shit, like I guess it's just continuing to make videos. It's the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's great. It means that you're on the path that you love. I think that when it comes to money, so many of us dream small and we play small. So we spend our time debating about lattes. We worry about a small amount of debt. But when was the last time we actually lived a life of imagination where we said, hey, what if I had $25,000? What would I do with it? And if you have never even thought about that for 5 seconds, then how are you ever gonna know what's exciting to you with money? And that's why most of us dread money. We don't wanna talk about it. It's always something that at the end of the month we look at our bills, oh God, I guess I spent that much. I wanna flip that, because I Will Teach You to Be Rich is about saying, hey, money can be exciting. Let's start with what I wanna do. I wanna take a trip to Thailand. I wanna stay in an amazing place. I wanna take a food tour. Great, let's start there. And when you start with what you want, then you can work your way backwards to, all right, how do I get there? But if you're stuck in latte land and you're stuck saying, I shouldn't spend money on this and I shouldn't do that, you're never gonna get out of that.
What about somebody who might say, like, Ramit, that's easy for you to say, I'm working 2 jobs, I'm $30,000 in debt, I've got car payments, all this. Yeah. It's hard for me to even imagine a world where I can get out of debt, let alone pay my bills. Like, how do those people, the ones that are struggling the most, live a rich life and get out of debt and set themselves up to be financially free?
I'd ask them one question. What's your debt payoff date? Almost nobody knows. I get these emails every single day. They're like, in small amounts of debt or huge amounts of debt? And I always say the same thing. What is your debt payoff date? What that means is, what is the exact month that your debt is going to be paid off? If you know that answer, you're in really good shape, even if it's 5, 10, 15 years from now, because it means you have a plan and you're automatically paying it off. But of course, the vast majority of people don't. They live under a cloud that's, I'm in debt, some of them think that it's existential and they have $3,000 of debt. I'm like, you could pay that off in a couple of months. It's not that big of a deal, or maybe 6 months. Some of them have significant amounts of debt. But the commonality is, if you just have this dull, throbbing pain in the back of your head, oh, debt, suddenly you start to identify yourself like that. You follow people on Twitter who are like, write these really depressing things about macro economy and there's no way millennials are ever going to get out of debt. You read subreddits where they think that they talk about everyone being in debt. And worst of all, you don't make a plan. What I want people to do is go to a debt payoff calculator. You can Google it. Put in your amounts. You would be surprised that probably 80% of the people I know who are in debt don't even know how much they owe. So step 1, find out how much you owe. Step 2, plug it into a calculator. You might discover that paying an extra $20 or $50 a month can cut that down by years. And then 3, once you have a plan, it's like, you have a big sigh of relief. Now, if you want to take an extra job, or you want to negotiate your rates, or you want to do X, Y, Z, you can affect that plan. But until you actually have a plan, you're just sitting here like, oh, this is really depressing. And that is the worst place to be.
Well, I do have to personally thank you for writing this book 15 some years ago. Is that when you wrote it?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Oh, right, 10 years, because it's the 10-year anniversary. But I remember getting this book. I was $97,000 in student loan debt. I had just bought a brand new car, which that was before I read the book. And so at that point, I'm about like $115,000, $120,000 in debt. And it did feel overwhelming. And it felt like there was just no plan, because a lot of times people aren't really teaching this stuff. It's not being taught in school necessarily. If your parents are bad with money, it's not being taught to you by them. So you have to go out and find this stuff for yourself. So I do want to just thank you for that, because it really set me on the right path and helped me out a lot.
Amazing.
But what are some of like the big stories that you've heard, and like, what is it about the book and about these methods that work? Because a lot of personal finance it can be driven on like just the numbers.
But lecturing you.
Yeah, but what I really loved about yours was the more of an approach on the behavioral change.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I mean, I can tell you all the stuff that went into the book, but there's nothing better than hearing someone who used it. So what made you decide to get the book initially, and then what did you discover as you went through it?
What I liked about yours is because it gave some alternate perspectives to personal finance, ones that related a little bit more to my own lifestyle and the things I was trying to do. But it was really the getting a bird's eye view and seeing my personal finance from that perspective that really helped to shape how I was viewing my finances.
I have to say, like, I sit in front of a computer all day and I get emails. We have like hundreds of thousands of people on my newsletter, and I love the emails I get, but there's nothing like hearing one real person who used it and hearing why you decided to start using it and what you noticed. Like, I love it. This is the highlight of why I do what I do. When I started writing this book, I was getting questions like, what's a 401k? Or like, I have $5,000 in debt, or I have $5,000 in my checking account. I don't know what to do with it. And the typical things that people had heard about money were luxury. They were kind of depressing because it was like living a life of a monk, which they did not want to do. Like, I want to go out with my friends. I want to pick up a round of drinks for them. And also, it's just confusing. You're like, who do I trust? Wall Street's trying to screw me, but I don't even know how. But I know I'm being screwed. And I have a soft spot in my heart for ordinary people who want to do the right thing, but the world is too confusing for them in personal finance. Because I spent years learning this stuff, and for the ordinary person, super hard. Like, you hear these phrases, expense ratios. What's that? Back end load. Huh? Even 401k, what the hell is that? And I wanted to find a way to break it down for people and not just focus on compound interest charts, because we've all seen these charts. It's like, dude, if you started investing at age 17, you'd be rich by now. It's like, yeah, well, I'm not 17 and I didn't start, so what do I do now? I wanted to integrate this psychology. And I think all of us, you and me included, probably have something that we claim we want to do more of, but we're not actually doing it. I think for a lot of people, it's working out. For a lot of people, it's money. It might even be relationships for people. And when I wrote the book, I wanted to start in chapter 1. Instead of saying, let's track your spending for the last month, blah, blah, blah. People are like they don't want to do that. They're like, I don't know what I spent, and also I know it was probably bad. So I don't think I'll read this book. I said, here's how the credit cards are mistreating you. Call these numbers, read these words off the page, and you will get your fees refunded. Like magic. And especially millennials, and especially in America, everybody hates the phone. So they were like, oh, I don't want to pick up the phone. But they did it. They get their $37 fee refunded. Boom. They're like, this thing works. And for the first time, they actually take control of their money. Soon, by the end, they're negotiating $10,000 raises. They are automating their money. And I think what a lot of people would love to be able to do, as they learn in chapter 5, is to spend 1 hour a month on their money, and that's it. And it just goes where it needs to go. Savings, investments, and my favorite part, guilt-free spending.
So what have been some of the updates and the learnings over the past 10 years that I know you said you added about 88 pages or so to
80
this
pages,
book?
man. I was like, damn, that's a lot of writing.
Yeah. So what can you add to it, right? Because a lot of this advice is very simple, a bit intuitive once you know it. It maybe isn't intuitive because a lot of people aren't practicing it, but in hindsight it certainly is. So what are some of the updates to this book, and what can people get out of it now compared to maybe when I read it 10 years ago?
So I was really proud that 95% of the investment material stands the test of time. In fact, 99%. This is stuff that's timeless. However, there are a lot of things that have changed. New tools. There's questions about robo-advisors, crypto. I saw one of your readers ask about some crypto stuff today. And better credit cards. So I updated all of that to tell people exactly the accounts that I'm using. Also the worst accounts to avoid. I name names. I tell people, can I name names right now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Don't use Wells Fargo. They are predatory pieces of shit. Bank of America, you also suck. They know that I don't like them. I talk about them everywhere. They're the worst.
Yeah, you're like on their hit list or something, the anti-influencer list.
Yeah, I'm on the negative influencer list at Bank of America. But they deserve it.
Yeah.
And I have no financial ties with these companies, but I wanted people to know exactly what I use. Because the fact of the matter is most people are not going to spend hours and hours cross-tabulating all these different accounts. They're like, let me find someone who I trust and let me just see what he does. So, I talk about great accounts too for checking, Schwab Investor Checking, Vanguard for investments, they're the best. And there's a lot of good savings accounts. In my experience, like if I find someone I like if I was gonna buy a camera, I'm coming straight to you. I'm like, dude, this is what I wanna do, what should I get? And whatever you tell me, I'm like, done. That's what people were looking for when it came to the book. So I updated the tools. I updated lots of insights on money and psychology. I'll give you an example. Do you ever remember any conversations that your parents had about money when you were growing up?
A lot, yeah.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it wasn't always good. It was always the conversations around not having enough money. Usually.
Like, do you remember any phrases that they said?
Wasn't cheap. That was like when we got Christmas gifts.
Wow.
Wasn't cheap.
And what did that mean to you?
I think whenever there was always, it felt like we just didn't have enough money, or how much did that cost?
Yeah.
Is a very big question.
Yeah.
You buy a new computer, everybody wants to know how much it costs.
And
it's like the Price is Right in my house.
Exactly. and like if you say the wrong answer, for example, let's say you said it was $2,800, what would the reaction have been?
Oh, it would be in shock that you spent that much money on something that maybe they didn't see the value in.
Yeah, and so like you did it wrong. Oh my God, I couldn't have scripted this better. This is amazing. So growing up in that family environment, the messages that you are receiving are, it's bad to spend a lot of money on things. If I spend a lot of money, I'm probably getting ripped off. And frugality or low prices is the best value of all. Now imagine for people who grew up, I'm sure there are a lot of people watching and listening to this, they're like, oh, my mom and dad said that every day. Or phrases like, we don't talk about money in this family. Or easy come, easy go. Those things carry with you for 20, 30, 40 years. And suddenly you're going to buy a car and you really want one type of car, which you love, but you say, I don't know, I should probably get the cheap one, the one that you will hate every day for the next 10 years while you drive it, but you saved an extra $700. Why? You just think that you did a rational analysis. Really, if you trace it back, it's the phrase you heard when you were 8 years old with your parents. And so in this book, I show these crazy money messages that we absorb from society. And some of them are good, and some of them are bad. And some of them are just appropriate for the time, but we're in a new place. My parents were immigrants. They came here, they needed to save money. And that made perfect sense. I still retain some of that frugality now. But I've also turned the chapter in my financial life. So now I don't want to be living the life of what I was learning at 8 years old. I want to be rewriting my financial story now. So I added that to the book. And for everyone listening, if you've ever thought about your own money behavior and you've ever wanted to have a magnifying glass on why do I spend money this way? Or how come I can't seem to stop feeling guilty about spending? You will find the answer. And the final thing I did was I added reader stories. This is my favorite part of the book. People who used the book 10 years ago. If you use this book, which came out in March 2009, happened to be the bottom of the recession, you're pretty much financially set for life. And I put my favorite part of this, I put photos because I think representation is really important. Men, women, black, white, old, young, to show you that rich is not somebody who works on Wall Street wearing a fur coat. That's not it. It's people like you, me, men, women, everybody. And they're living their rich life. So that's what's new in the book.
Well, when you do the 20-year version, let me know. I would love to contribute.
Oh, man.
$97,000 in debt, plus the student loan in 4.5 years. I was able to pay it all off. So
incredible.
Thank you for that. Wow. When we're talking about the stories we tell ourselves, a lot of times that influences how people view us, especially if we're people who are trying to start our own businesses. Desperation can be smelled from a mile away. And it's something that I look back at and I cringe when I see some messages that I've sent people and potential prospective clients. It's like, oh, I was clearly desperate. I clearly wanted their money. So how do you go about helping guide people on getting business and getting clients when they don't have any? Yeah. They truly are, they feel desperate. What's the best way to approach that and talk about money and talk about business in a way that's actually going to help them?
You're totally right that you can smell desperation from a mile away. And it could be in business, in personal life, like anywhere. We just finally attuned to knowing what is desperate and what is powerful. I think when it comes to business, I teach a lot of people how to start businesses and how to grow them. We have different courses and we have a whole bunch of free stuff on our site. If you're starting out and you don't have any clients and you don't have the team behind you and all the equipment, the first thing I would say is it's okay to be honest. You don't have to describe yourself as we. You could say I. That's like a classic thing.
Yeah.
They're like, we would like to. It's like, just say I, man. We know, you and I both know that it's one guy sitting like in an apartment. It's fine. I actually think that can be refreshing. The second thing is to remember that you have to offer value to them and it's not about you. A lot of us get caught up in our insecurities. We, and I can meet you at our office, but like really nobody cares where you're operating from and if it's we or I. What I care about as a client is myself. Can you help me save time, make money, live an easier life? If so, great. So I'm going to give you an example of someone who did this to me. They used what I call the briefcase technique. The briefcase technique is a really powerful technique. You can find the video online. And it basically is how a lot of my students get dream jobs and they just leapfrog over people who have 10 years more experience, or they get clients when they really are just beginning. So what they do, one guy came to me, his name is Charlie Hone. And he said, hey, Ramit, I noticed you're starting to do videos a lot more on YouTube. One thing that I would recommend is that you do X. In fact, I edited your last video. Here you go. And you can post it if you like. Anyway, if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you more. I replied in like 2 minutes. I was like, let's talk on the phone. So what did he do? He knew what I wanted, what my challenges were. He saw that I was starting to do more on YouTube. He came to me. He had a proposal. If you're going for a job interview or a client meeting, it's like, here's what I would do 30, 60, and 90 days in. Boom. He, in essence, pulled it out of a briefcase, which is very theatrical, as I talk about in the video. And there was no way for me to say no. Like, it was literally irresistible to me. I worked with him for several years, and then I introduced him to Tim Ferriss. So these are the kind of things you can do to completely stand out. Notice that it's not about you. Oh, boo-hoo, I don't have any clients. Boo-hoo, I don't have the fancy car. Who cares? It's not about you. It's about the client. So you focus on them, how you can accelerate their growth, and suddenly they will be more than happy to pay.
That's hilarious because I remember seeing you on Chase Jarvis Live years ago, long time ago, and you talked about the briefcase technique, and I used it myself. Yeah, I used it for a really high-end tech company in New York. Ended up being a very big client. And it was powerful to give an extra offer. I think the one thing that I took away from it is that you have to do what everybody else isn't doing.
Yes.
So if they have 10 other people come in that are pitching their film and video services, I guarantee nobody else is gonna give, obviously it's theatrical, but then I'm obviously providing value, being like, here, I actually did a bunch of research on where your company's at and where it could potentially go, and these are some things that we could do once we get past these first few videos that you want. And it's like, nobody else is doing that. And I think a lot of people do that even in just basic job interviews. They're not preparing for an interview like other people are.
Yeah, most people in life are going by as if they're floating on a river and it's just going slowly and they're just like on a raft, drinking a beer, just having a nice time. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are certain points in life where you decide, you know what, I want to pull that row out and I want to row and I want to go that way. So you take control. If it's a job interview, most people, they walk in and they answer questions. That's not what a job interview is. A job interview is you go in there and you have your key message. And usually it's like 3 key points. If you're just going in there and you're answering questions, you've already lost and you don't even know. But if you go in there, and here are some things you can do to stand out. You have studied the CEO's press hits from the last year. What is the CEO, what is he or she saying about the company, about their corporate strategy? So you write that down. You've talked to people who used to work at the company. You emailed them through LinkedIn. You took them out to coffee. Hey, what's up with this company? I'm thinking of working here. Is it good? What do I need to know? You write your notes down. Maybe you even network with some people who currently work there. You think anyone else is going to do that? No. People are floating down the river, but you put your row in the water and you decided to go that way. That's how people command $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more than other people. That's how people make big money. And I want everyone to kind of listen carefully because if you want to live the life that you want, I'm not saying you just like click a button and make $1 million. That's bullshit. You need to work and you need to outwork other people, but you also want to be smart about it. You want to be doing your research. You want to be asking the questions that others are not. And everything in this, whether it's money or business, is about providing value to others. So you do that, you're going to sail past them.
I think the quickest way to pay off your debt is to make more money, right? So what are some of the approaches that people can go about making more money, say, as a freelancer, and then also as somebody who's working a 9-to-5 job? What are these ways that people can make more money?
Okay, first of all, I love talking about making more. Do you know why most personal finance experts never talk about earning more?
Because they don't know what they're talking about?
They don't know how.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that. That's why this is a whole part of the equation is missing in money. All they talk about is cutting back. I'm like, what about the other side of the table? You can earn more. So I have chosen to focus. Yes, I manage my expenses, but when it comes to managing, I basically spend the same amount on most things, except I have two areas that I tend to overspend on them. One is travel and one is clothes. Those are my two. So I know that if I'm within these parameters, it kind of flags it red or green. Aside from that, everything else is like pretty much taken care of. If you want to earn more at your job, there's some straightforward ways of doing it. And then we can talk about freelancing, which I've done. The typical way people think about earning more at their job is they just wait to be given a raise by their boss, or they kind of build this thing up in their head. They're like, I'm gonna go in my boss's office, give me some more money or I'm quitting. And then of course the boss is like, get the fuck out of here. And then they just they don't know what to do. They're like, not a good situation. A better way is to be really strategic about it. So here's a quick suggestion on how you can get large raises. And this works very well. I will routinely be walking down the street in New York. People will come up to me, they're like, I got a $16,000 raise because of what you taught me. So this stuff works, but the magic is in the details. So what you do, you send an email to your boss, you say, I would love to discuss some of the projects I'm working on, and I'd love to get some time with you, okay? So you walk in, and you talk to your boss, you say, here's what I'm working on. I wanted to kind of sync up on my role. My first question is, what can I do to be a top performer? Your boss might be a little confused. They might say this or that. It doesn't really matter what they say. You need to just simply go back to your key message. What does it take to become a top performer? Because I want to exceed expectations in my role. So by the end of that meeting, you're going to have 3 or 4 crisp things that you walk out with. Write them down. For example, you need to boost conversion from 10 to 12%. You need to hire XYZ person and you need to do X, whatever. Write it down and say, you know what? These sound great. I'm really excited about them. Now, if I hit all these goals, I'd like to discuss a compensation adjustment, but let's deal with that later. First, I want to focus on this. So the boss is going to love it because you're coming in when everyone else just floating along the river of work, just showing up to work every day. And you're saying, what does it take to be the best here? And by the way, I'm going to help you, my boss, exceed your goals. Let me take it on. Great. So you walk out, you think about how you're going to execute on that. You send an email saying, here's what we talked about, compensation adjustment discussion later, but for now, I just want to work on these. And the time period for this is typically like 6 to 12 months. So you're sending an email every 1 to 2 weeks. Here's what we talked about. Here's an update. Now, let's assume that you hit those goals. If you don't hit those goals, then maybe you don't deserve a raise. But if you do, you set up another meeting. Here we are 6 months later. I'd like to sit down again and update you on the goals. You walk in, now this is the best meeting of your life. You walk in, you say, 6 months ago we talked about X, Y, and Z. Well, I'd like to show you a couple things. I'm really happy. Smiling. Boom. You talked about 10 to 12%. We actually have a confirmed 13.3%. I'm so happy. You talked about hiring one person. We actually were able to hire 2 people. We've got a third on deck. You talked about blank, boom. The boss is just like loving it. You're giving each other pats on the back. Great. You say, you know what? The other thing we discussed was a potential compensation adjustment. So I'd like to discuss that now. Boss getting a little nervous. Whoa, what's about to happen? But the boss has been updated along every 2 weeks, so they know it's not a surprise. Now you pull out your salary research, which you pulled from salary.com. You say, based on my role, I'm currently paid 58. For my role, it looks like I should be paid between 63 and 67. I'd like to have an adjustment based on my performance of exceeding these goals to $67,000. Now, let the silence fill the room. Stop talking. Just follow my STHU technique. Shut the hell up and let the boss think. Boss is probably going to come back and say, look, I can't do 67. That's above your current pay grade, but you have done a great job. We can talk about 63. Okay, so first of all, you just made $5,000. But now you can have some negotiation. You can use some of my videos on how to actually go through this. But you walked out taking a proactive role in your career. You set a goal with your boss. You confirmed it every step of the way. And then you walked in and said, this is what I'm worth. That is how you negotiate. It's totally different than what most people imagine. And if you do that once a year, you can probably do that consistently for your career. It is incredibly empowering. I hope everyone just does that one thing. You will watch your career soar if it works for you.
And you could literally start next week.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about having the meeting. And like, if I asked most people, what does it take to be a top performer in your role? They'd have no idea. Yeah. So this is great. First things first, you're learning what it takes to be awesome at your job. And then if you are awesome, you should get paid more.
So if somebody's a freelancer, they have their own business, what are the ways that they can grow their business? I know the common thought for most freelancers, I would imagine, would be, I need to go out and get more clients.
That's classic. And sometimes it's true, but I did a lot of client work years ago. There's like 3 ways to really grow your business. You can get more customers, you can raise the average order value, or you can increase the purchase frequency. That's like a very different way of looking at growing your business, because most people only focus on one thing. The classic thing, I know a lot of creatives, photographers, writers, etc., and they just go through this, it's not even feast or famine. It's like famine, maybe get a little morsel, and then back to famine. They're constantly dealing with low value clients. So they're like getting $400 here or $4,000 there, and they just like keep on, they spend all their time just like chasing. It's horrible. Have you experienced this, or you know people like this?
Yeah, I mean, early on, a lot of my friends were trapped in the music video game, making music videos where historically very low budget, especially for the DIY guys. People who work wedding films, like there's usually a certain threshold of where you can go. And for me, I saw a lot of people doing that and just kind of scraping the barrel, but not being able to get out of it.
Yeah, they're just in this vortex.
Yeah.
Stuck. It's like quicksand. In order to get out of that, you have to make some really different and often difficult decisions. And if you ask the average freelancer who's stuck in quicksand, would you like to, instead of charging $400 per client, charge $4,000? They're like, yeah, I'd love that. And you're like, okay, are you willing to do things differently? Yeah, of course. And then you show them a couple things they need to do, and they're like, fuck that, I'm not gonna do that. So what I would say is, if you're in a creative industry, know that there are people charging 10 times more than you. Go find them. Look at what they do, and don't scoff, don't disparage them. Instead, get curious, D to C. Why is this wedding photographer able to command $15,000? What do they do differently? Let me look at their website. Let me look at the way they talk about their services. Let me see what they offer. And I'll give you an example from a travel agent. I recently went on a very long honeymoon, 6 weeks, and I started researching travel agents. Now, first of all, have you ever used a travel agent?
No.
Who the hell uses a travel agent? It's like so weird, right?
Yeah, it's like the 80s.
Yeah, like exactly. But this was a very long, complex trip to multiple continents, and I was like, you know what? I think that I could use the help, and I started learning about the travel agent industry. I would like to challenge everyone to do this. Go Google travel agents. Click on whatever you find and just look what you see. They literally all say the same thing. They literally say, provide you service, add value, blah, blah. It's just like, this is all bullshit. They all look the same. That's how you look to clients. If you're a wedding photographer, I also hired a wedding photographer for our wedding. They all look the same. So we found someone totally different. So let me give you a couple of examples. Once you do your research on all the travel agents, you're just gonna be like, these are all the same. They're commodities. They're like salt. I could buy this, I could buy that, it's a commodity. I found 2 that I thought were phenomenal. Now, for us, for the clientele, we wanted to take a luxury trip. It was very complex, and we wanted everything to be handled. So that's the clientele we're talking about in this scenario. Go look at a couple of brands. One is Scott Dunn, who we ended up using. Mikado is also a really good luxury travel agent. Go look at what they say in their positioning and branding. And they charge way more than the typical travel agent. Why? Go study that and see what they do. For everyone who is stuck on finding more clients, realize this. If you're currently charging $400 or $4,000, whatever you're charging, getting more clients is just gonna put you in the same position unless you radically increase it, unless you find a way to 2x, 3x, 5x. So think about what you need to change. If you're only offering wedding photos, maybe you can do same day photos. because your wedding couple wants to post it on Instagram. Maybe you can do different types of edits. There's a million different things you can do. What your clients probably don't care about is you talking about all your technical camera, f-stop equipment. They don't give a shit about that. You got to really interview your clients and say, what is it that you value and who else are you talking to? Study those people, change your service offerings, and then constantly test it. That's how you get out of quicksand.
You could really see where these money stories that we tell ourselves and our parents tell ourselves as kids could even influence your business. And I think sometimes we get advice from the wrong people.
Oh, from a bunch of broke entrepreneurs. You and your broke entrepreneur photographers all in the same subreddit. Oh, there's no way, life is so difficult, boohoo. It's like you're getting advice from other people who are not succeeding. Why are you listening to them?
And you're even thinking about yourself. You're like, well, I would never spend $2,000 for a wedding film or a wedding video.
Yeah, but you're not the client. Exactly. I'm so glad you say this. If you yourself don't value what you're offering, your clients can sniff that out from a million miles away. So I talked to a bunch of photographers. It was amazing. When I got on wedding photography calls with my, at the time, fiance, dude, it was insane. We get on the call, and it was like they all must have read the same book. And I was like, whatever book this is, it sucks. Because they go, what's your love story?
Oh, goodness.
Like, what the fuck? First of all, what's a love story? And second of all, why do I want to tell this love story to some rando I'm never going to talk to again? So we had a 30-minute call, right? And like, I'm punctual, and we're 16 minutes into the call talking about how we met. And I'm like, I'm just like, this is just bad strategy. You really, I didn't say this, but I'm like, you really want to be using 16 out of 30 minutes on our love story? And I later realized they're trying to build rapport, and usually they're like dealing with the, in my case, my fiance, but I was like leading the call. The calls were not going well. Finally, we talked to one photographer who we loved, and she was just like, she asked us questions, she could read the room, and she realized, okay, like, get to the point, talk about what we want. We had a multicultural wedding, so like, oh, I've done that. I've shot an Indian and Jewish wedding, da-da-da-da. Now we're talking. We're looking at her photos. But like, what did not come up? I never asked her about her equipment. I don't give a shit. I just look at her photos. I'm like, how fast can you get them? How do you guarantee that you don't lose the film? And I want this, this, and this. Done. Price was irrelevant. When you nail the right client and you nail the positioning, I always say price is a mere triviality. So if you're busy worrying about things, and you kind of know when it's not working. It's like you're trying to convince these clients and they're just like, they're not interested, or you feel like you're really having to put the sell, you know something is wrong. When it clicks, like it just fits, that's when you know you've nailed the right client and the right position and the right offer.
I think if you're having a wedding and you can't afford a decent photographer, then you probably can't afford a wedding. Like, I mean, I think one thing, people actually just rush into getting married just to get married before they're actually ready for it financially, which is a big mistake. But I think also people don't realize the actual value of a photographer. They think it's just taking high quality photos.
Yeah.
And if you've ever watched a wedding photographer, or if you've watched an amateur even, you can see that they don't know how to organize, they don't know how to put people together. It's gonna slow down the entire wedding, the schedule's gonna get pushed off. And there is real value in somebody with experience. So people think, oh, the only thing I'm looking at is price. When you're like, well, it's reliability.
Yeah.
Are the photos going to get lost? There's about 100 other things that could be more valuable than money.
Exactly, and you should educate your prospects. You should show them why, not tell them. Show them why. Some people just won't get it, and so if those are like, don't cater to the lowest common denominator. If you want to be charging 5x or 10x, then you have to be willing to let a lot of small fish go in order to catch the whale. Okay, that's something that's really hard for people. If you're feast or famine, for me to come in, oh, Mr. Ramit saying like, let these small, well, that's nice for you to say, but you have to actually start getting comfortable saying, you know what, I'm gonna let these people go so I can focus on the big one. And I'll give a big shout out to my own wedding photographer, our photographer, Cassie Valente. We found her after interviewing a ton of people. And to your point, she was not just shooting photos. She to get huge groups of like 30 people together, kids and everyone, and to be like, okay, look here,
like everybody.
Everyone, and to be authoritative and also friendly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, every dollar I spent with her was the best money ever.
Yeah.
So the right client values it, and they're happy to talk to other people about you. But you have to find the right client. You have to offer the right services.
I want to ask you a couple selfish questions, things that I'm working on, things that I'm struggling with, and I imagine a couple people, other people that are listening might as well. But so One is currently my main revenue stream is Patreon and making money through people paying for a subscription to get videos, like behind the scenes stuff. And I'm thinking about developing my first course. I'm
Love
thinking
it.
about creating, I mean, just inspired by what you do, but also just, and having, I had Melissa Griffin on the podcast, who's like really great
She's
at
great.
developing courses and selling them. And I just see a lot of value that I could provide. You are somebody who is very rigorous in how you develop courses, and that's something that I really appreciate. And the fact that you put a lot of time and attention, and sometimes it takes you years to create a course. If somebody wants to come in, I mean, a lot of people are working in the $20, $50, $95 range of creating courses. If somebody were to develop a high-end course, what's the process of creating that, and what advice would you give somebody who right now they're not sure, even they have maybe a hunch of what kind of course they want to make, but they're not positive it's going to hit? How would they go about creating it, making sure they're making the right thing and they don't waste all their time?
Okay, I love this. I love courses. I think they are absolutely amazing. So just a tiny bit of context. I've created courses from $4.95 to $20,000. And they're different at each level, but I will tell you what I would do if I was considering creating a course. The first thing I would do is I would send a message to my audience, whether it's on video, podcast, whatever. And I would say, I'm considering creating a course on X. Do you have an idea what the topic is?
I have two.
Okay.
I mean, this is like interesting to even go into this, but like one would be on habit change, and then one would be on filmmaking and kind of like how to up your YouTube game, how to bring Netflix quality to YouTube.
Great. So we can talk about how to parse those ideas, but I'm going to give you a quick little back of the napkin exercise that we use in one of our courses, which is called Zero to Launch. It's called the pay certainty technique. So you want to make sure that you will be certain people can pay for it. How? Just a quick back of the napkin. Ask yourself this. Does my audience have the ability and willingness to pay? So ability, can they afford it? So can filmmakers afford to pay?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I just don't think that my audience filmmakers is that big.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's another thing.
That's another thing. And do they have the willingness? Would they pay for a course?
Yes.
Okay. And then what was the other audience?
Habit change.
Okay. Do they have the ability to pay?
I don't know.
Good question. And would they pay for a habit change course?
I think so, yeah. Based on other courses I've seen and other people doing it.
Okay. So like a good way to know that is to go and survey them and say, have you ever bought another product, book, or course on habit change? If the answer is no, it's usually a bad sign. If they've said, yes, I bought this course, it was good, but it didn't have this one thing, that's a great answer. Because people who have bought previously are likely to buy again. Okay, so what I would do is I would say, I'm putting together an idea for a course. I'm looking for 15 people to be beta testers. It's free, but you have to apply, you have to commit to showing up once a week, and you have to commit to XYZ. Like, make it an application. With your audience size, you're definitely gonna get flooded. And I would make it really hard. Like, your job is to say no and find the very best people. Then you create your course, and it can literally be like Google Docs. What I do is I do a live webinar once every week for 6 to 8 weeks. I test it live. And I'm seeing what works and what doesn't. Like when I started creating Zero to Launch, I spent a whole module on positioning. That was like way too complicated. People are like, what the fuck is this? Like, just give me a couple of tips and let's move on. Great, I would have never known. So I'm really testing it rigorously. By the time you finish that test, you're gonna have awesome testimonials. You're gonna know what works and what doesn't. You can include those in your sales page, and you're just gonna feel really confident this thing works. We only sell courses when we know they work. Oftentimes they go through months or years of testing. So that's the way that you get a course that sells forever. And that's what I would encourage you to do.
A lot of work goes into making something legit. You have to make sure that you're not offering up something that's gonna fall flat. That's
I mean,
gonna help people.
Well, that's what most people do with these courses, right? So they're like, oh man, courses, I can make $1 million. And so they slap together something in like 3 days. And they literally just sit down, they're like, oh, I know about like filmmaking. Okay, I'm just gonna like module 1, module 2. But people don't think in terms of modules. And they don't want to buy a course that's a dictionary or an encyclopedia. They don't want information. If they wanted information, they would simply go Google how to shoot with a camera. They buy a course because they want something else. There's an emotional arc. You need to understand that. Like in module 1, they're super pumped and excited. By module 3, they're like, oh God, this is a lot of work. By module 7, they're like, oh my God, I'm about to do it. And so you need to understand that and account for that. If you go the cheap route, you will get cheap results. If you just create a course and see what happens, you might do a few $100, maybe a few $1,000, but it's going to be really hard to sell it again. And I would personally just prefer to front load the work, know that it's an amazing course, and then be able to sell it forever.
Are you charging those people, like the first 15 people that are taking it, or?
If you're starting out, I wouldn't, because you just want the feedback. Later, we have done paid beta tests because we wanted to make sure that we had the right people, like people who would actually pay. But 90% of the time, I would just do it for free.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of people get into wanting to build a course just for the money, and they're looking at the wrong thing. Where if you want it to be successful, you need to figure out how can I help these people the most. And the best way to do that is actually putting the work up front. Another thing, another personal question that others might be dealing with is, I got Conrad helping me out here, but for the most part, it's just myself. So how did you go about scaling from 0 to 1 employee, 1 to 10, 10 to 25? Like how, and you don't have to go into crazy detail, but for a lot of people, those are really big leaps to make.
Yeah. Again, going back to the money stories, I used to tell myself, I just want a small, intimate team.
It's literally like, you hit me.
And where did I get that stupid fucking phrase from? I have no idea. But I would just say it. I would say it over and over until it became part of my identity. So, but what I really wanted was I wanted to make an impact. And it becomes increasingly difficult to make a bigger and bigger impact if it's just you. And you know that because you're like answering customer service emails or responding to some Instagram comment when really what you should be doing is what you're doing right now. Like this is your zone of genius. And so I had to rewrite my own story. Again, I don't even know where it came from. And I had to say, you know what? I want to have a big impact. And if that means I have 1 team member or 20 or 50, so be it. I'll get strong enough and knowledgeable enough to know how to manage and hire. So that was the first thing, was just like really getting aligned and congruent on what I wanted. Your first hire is tough. And I also just want to tell people that your first 5 or 10 hires are going to be horrible. It's fine. Just acknowledge it. It's going to be terrible. It's like going bowling. You're going to hit the gutter every time your first 2, 3, 10 games. It's fine. People, they start off saying like, how do I find the perfect project manager? I'm like, you don't. You suck at hiring, you don't know how to manage, that's okay. My first hire was an assistant. It was a part-time assistant who worked for me like 10 hours a week as a contractor. And it was simple. Like I learned how to basically manage and like what tasks to delegate and trust and all that stuff. Over time, I increased the hours and then I brought on people full-time.
I think right there, that's interesting though too, because a lot of people have this misconception that you have to hire a full-time employee right away.
No.
And it's like that, I think, is what holds people back from hiring somebody to begin with.
Yeah, it's like you don't have to go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
You can go 0 to 5. And just get your feet wet. And an assistant is a great, great place to start. It could be someone to handle your customer service emails. It could be someone to handle your travel planning. Whatever some simple thing you need is, that's a great place to start. It's going to get your mindset in the right place. From there, you can expand their time. You can also bring on more specialists, like somebody to help with film, etc.
Is there much of a difference between hiring like that first person to then scaling a larger team? And
Yes.
like it just seems so complicated. And I will say that you did say like for you were telling yourself a false story. I imagine there are many people, and I know Paul Jarvis, who I'm going to have a conversation with soon, he just wrote a book called Company of One, where, I think there are benefits in those who would rather just stay small. So I think it's really just understanding, being honest with yourself. If somebody did want to scale beyond 10 to 25, like that just seems like a lot.
It's definitely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in business. And unfortunately, there are no books that can guide you. You can read books about leadership and management, and you should, but I found that it became incredibly complex after about 15 people. 15 is great, you kind of know everybody, the amount of meetings you have is small. After that, there's this big inflection point where you need to build structure. A couple of things that I would suggest that I learned along the way for hiring. Number one, it's okay to make hiring mistakes. You're a beginning manager, that's okay. So don't beat yourself up. This is really, really hard. The other thing I learned was if you have people who you trust, that becomes more important even than random skills here or there. In other words, I would rather hire someone who is aligned ethically with me, like they want to build the best products and they're willing to take the time to do it. I can teach them Excel or customer insight, all that stuff. But if someone comes in and they're like, I want to do this really cool for like 1 year so I can go off somewhere else and like tell everyone I worked with Ramit, not as interested in that. So I think that's important. I would also say that you want to make sure you have your finances dialed in. So hiring one person full-time can be very expensive. And as you become more and more like of a large organization, you add benefits, you add 401ks, you have all these different types of things that you need to be thinking about. And so that takes time and money for you to administer. Like I never imagined that I would have HR and all these other legal issues and things to be thinking about. Now I do, but at a certain point, it's just part of the game. So you just take it step by step. Those are some of the things that I would suggest to people. But also, you don't really need to be thinking about 25 people because that's like thinking way far ahead. Hire one, hire two, hire five. 3 of those people will probably leave. That's okay. Rehire. Now you're gonna know so much more and be much closer to the path of 25.
I want to touch on a couple more personal finance things, and then we'll answer some questions here from Twitter. I think for many people, it's clearly easy to get swept up in consumerism and wanting to buy the next shiny thing and show and prove to other people that we're quote unquote successful. How do we avoid that trap? How do we make sure that we don't go down that path and we're actually focusing on things that we truly value?
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree. You see it in so many different places. You log on to Instagram. First thing, wake up, and I do this, by the way. First thing, Instagram, it's like, this guy's in Bora Bora on like a Wednesday. I fucking hate this guy. And then, I'm smarter than that person. How come they have that? And it's just like an addiction engine that is built on envy and jealousy. And I had a friend who recently told me he was in a beautiful hotel in a beautiful city over New Year's. And New Year's Eve, he happened to log onto his phone. And he was swiping and he saw one of his friends was at like a little bit of a nicer hotel on a beach. And he's like, that's like a pretty nice hotel. And then he swipes and his next one is on an even nicer hotel in a different island. And he's just like, I feel horrible about this. Now his solution was to stop using Instagram. I'm not gonna say whether you should do that or not, that's really up to you. What I would say is most of us are chasing things that we don't even genuinely care about. So when we go back to that question of what would your rich life be? If I gave you $50,000, what would you spend it on? Pick that thing and unapologetically spend on it. You should. I want you to have permission if you need it from me. Go buy the best computer or a beautiful leather jacket, whatever it is. But also get really honest with yourself about what you don't care about. If somebody asks you, like for me, it's a classic thing to think that you have to buy a house once you've made it to a certain point in society. Not only do I not believe that, and you can run the numbers and you can see why real estate is not always the greatest investment, but the biggest problem is when people say, oh, you own this place, right? And I say, no, I rent. And suddenly they go like this. Oh. That subtle peer pressure is so influential for us. Oh, you don't have the best car? Oh, your iPhone is 3 years old? Oh, you don't belong to that gym? Oh, you rent? And it makes us feel like losers. And I think that being able to have the strength to say, you know what? That's not what's interesting to me. I choose to focus my time and my money here. To get internally congruent with that is the hardest part. You could tell this person, you could answer them whatever you want. You could say, like my answer that I've come to is, it doesn't make financial sense for me. And people are super confused because they don't understand what? I thought buying is when you have money, whatever. But I have no interest in convincing someone of my own values. I know what matters is that my wife and I are aligned and that's it. But you have to get aligned with yourself. If you constantly feel bad because you don't have the newest iPhone, nobody's gonna fix that except you.
It seems like your definition of living a rich life and the concepts in minimalism are very intertwined. It seems like it's just like different words, different ways of, not even different ways of looking at it. Because essentially it's about, when you talk about money dials, finding what you value most in life, investing in that, and then just letting the other stuff go.
Yeah, and it's two different approaches to the same destination, right? Minimalism and I Will Teach You to Be Rich, we want to find the things that we love, that we value, that we care about. And then, like you said, we want to let the other things go. How you do that is up to you. You can truly let them go. In the book, I talk about the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early. And some of these people choose to basically retire with like 100 or 200,000 bucks. They retire in their 30s and they live a very, very simple, minimalist lifestyle. Very simple. That's not for me. That's not my style, but I respect that they have done that. There's like the fat FIRE people who choose to retire early and they want to live in Manhattan and have like a fat apartment and, send their kids to private school. Maybe not also for me, but you can choose that. What I want people to do is to decide what their rich life is and then use the money to fuel that. And half the battle is really getting congruent with yourself and saying, what do I want? Maybe I need to dream bigger on some of this stuff because I've been playing small, but some of this stuff I just don't care about, so I'm going to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think it's about identifying the assumptions that we're making about the life that we're going to want to live at 65 or even 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I know that was big in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, was just this idea of a lot of people think that they're working their entire life to get to 65 so they can retire.
Oh my God. Okay, I just want to tell you something that I discovered just recently. So we were planning for our honeymoon. We were going to take the typical 8 to 10 days, and we went out to dinner with some friends, and they asked us about our honeymoon, and we were going to go on a safari. So we told them our plans, and they were like, oh, that sounds awesome. And then one of them said, when we went on our honeymoon, we took 6 months off. And they weren't bragging. They just said, we had an amazing time. And my wife and I looked at each other like, who are these people? And then the next couple was like, yeah, we took a year off and we just traveled. And these are like, we thought normal
they were
people.
Australians.
We're like, what? Yeah, we had no idea. So we walk out of that restaurant and we looked at each other and we're like, did you hear that? And she's like, yeah. And then it just started our wheels turning. And we started with these two magical words, what if? What if we didn't just go for 8 or 10 days? What if we went for a month? What if we went for a year? And we ultimately decided to go for 6 weeks. And in order to get that, we had to make a lot of different decisions. I had to prepare my business to sustain and grow while I was gone. She had to do the same with her business. While I traveled, I worked about 6 hours over 6 weeks. So my team did an amazing job of not only holding the fort, but growing. When we went to Italy, Kenya, India, and Thailand. When we were in Italy, it totally transformed the way I thought about work because Italians live very well. They have work, which is a core part of life, but they also have so much more. And it's dinners, and it's recreation, and it's walking around. And I realized with some perspective that I had been putting work as one of the biggest parts of my life, if not the entire part, and that there had to be room for other parts in life, not just work. So work, which was this big, needed to become this, and I needed to add other parts to my life. It helped me get a lot of perspective, and I never would have done that had I not gotten out of my day-to-day and had these dinner conversations and then dreamed what if. So for everyone here, if the questions that you've been asking yourself potentially artificially limit you, like, oh, I'll never pay off debt, I'm always going to be in debt. Well, what if you paid off your debt in 4 years? Oh, I'm never going to be able to get out of this feast or famine or charge like 10 times more like those photographers. What if you could charge 20 times what you're charging? It can be done. One of my students is a caricature artist. She charged $8 an hour. We taught her how to turn that caricaturing into a $100,000 a year plus business. What if you could do that? And so instead of being mired in all the negative and I'll never get out of this and life is so tough and millennials, what if? And when you start from that position, suddenly you can open up the doors. And that's what I would say for everyone's rich life.
I love that. And it's something that builds on itself too, because the longer you do it, 4 years in, 6 years in, the more you realize that it's possible.
Yeah.
And because you are likely going to be continually evolving and pushing yourself into more and more challenging situations. If you're not, then things get too easy, right? So, but it becomes a little bit easier to convince yourself to make those leaps in those moments.
Absolutely.
Let's do a few questions here from Twitter, and then we'll wrap up. Let's see here. Okay, some specific questions here. This one's from Elvis Rios. Should you pay off your student loans as quickly as possible when you're trying to build a business, or try to extend the loan as much as possible by paying the minimum and using the immediate funds to fund your business?
Two answers to this question. There's the mathematical answer and the psychological answer. The mathematical answer says find out how much your interest rate is, and if it's a high interest rate like 6% plus, you want to pay that off quickly because you're incurring a lot of interest. The psychological answer says, look, if you want to take $100 a month or $200 a month or whatever it is and put it towards your business, even though it might not be economically rational, go ahead. And so I would encourage people to really, first of all, run the numbers, look at how much you're paying in interest, and play with that. If I put $100 a month towards my debt, how long is it going to take? What if I do 150? And then say, okay, what if I took that extra 50 and put it towards my business? Would it be meaningful? I think ultimately what you will find is you should basically just make a decision, just make any decision and automate those payments. What you're going to discover is once you focus on your business, you get that flywheel turning for your clients. And suddenly, I don't know how much this person is making per client, but if you get 3 clients, you can get 6. And if you get 6, you can get 20. And suddenly you're going to be making a lot more so that the debt, the $100, $150 becomes irrelevant. You're going to be driving the shit out of how many clients you can get over here, raising your average order value and increasing frequency, and that's going to make all the difference, not 10 or 20 bucks here.
Yeah, I think in the beginning those decisions are challenging, but I mean, even when I was in debt, it was like, yeah, I need headphones. I'm going to buy headphones. And like, there are certain investments that I think are okay to make. You just have to be honest with yourself about how much you're willing to invest in your business and how much is actually going to give you the return that you need.
Okay, this is another great question. And I find that photographers do this a lot. I knew a photographer who was struggling to find clients. And he was like, I'm going to buy, what is it, like a red camera? Some expensive ass camera. And I'm like, how's that going to get you clients? Yeah. Like, I get that it's a great camera, but it's almost like on Reddit, they do this thing where it's like, draw a picture, draw a line, 3 question marks, and then like this magical owl comes out. It's like fully shaded and everything. It's like, how do you go from buying a very expensive camera to getting more clients? Can you be clear about that? And if the answer is, I'm going to be working with these clients and I'm losing deals because I don't have the right equipment, makes perfect sense. But if you're just spending money on equipment and you're not sure how it's going to translate to clients, be honest with yourself. And maybe you just rent it for a couple of days first to start. But you need to make sure when you're investing early on that it's driving real ROI.
Yeah, I think early on is key. I mean, I actually bought a Red about 2 years ago, and it ended up being a mistake. The idea behind it was that it wasn't the only money I had. I wasn't investing my last dollar into a camera, but it was a continual investment. My business is growing. It's doing really well. I want to continue to be like the highest end film production company. And to do that, you have to invest in the right gear. But then 6 months later, I decided I'm going to start a YouTube channel and I'm not going to do client work anymore, right? Like, it's hard to understand where we're going. Yeah. And so I sold it. But the guy I sold it to, he thought that was going to give him business, and he was just starting out. He was very early on. I actually tried to talk him out of it. I was like, listen, man, like, honestly, I don't think this is going to help your business. I'm not going to stop you from buying it if you want to. And he ended up getting it. And a lot of people have this misconception early on that anybody gives a shit about the camera.
Yeah, and the reason for that, the psychology behind it is that it's really easy to delegate our decisions to paying for it. This is why a lot of people go to grad school. Oh, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Let me go to grad school because I can just pay the problem away. This is why a lot of people use recruiters in their job search. I don't know what I want to do. Boom, I'll just pay a recruiter. Fine. Same with equipment. The real value comes from you doing the hard work. That's why with the briefcase technique, you can't just pay someone to walk into your boss's office and come up with things. You got to do the fucking work. Same thing with your camera or creative business. You can't just throw money in ads and have it massively grow. You need to really understand where are you advertising, what's your positioning, who are you reaching out to, what's the value prop. That stuff is hard, and no one can do it except you. So I would challenge everyone, there's no magic bullet where you're just gonna spend $100 and make 10,000. That's not how business works. But if you do the right thing day after day, 1% by 1%, your business really starts to snowball.
Christian Crisolo, how can I become financially free while being an average day job earner?
That's how most people do it. So don't handicap yourself by saying, oh, I'm just an average day job earner. The vast majority who have become wealthy did it through something that you have access to, which is the stock market. So let's flip this. One of the most powerful things I learned from one of my mentors, Jay Abraham, was to take a weakness and turn it into a strength. This guy says, I'm just an average day job having guy. I'm like, you are set up, man. You can take the money that you make and you can put some of it into a 401k. If you've got a 401k match, that's free money. Do that. You've got an IRA, you can set that up. It's all in here. It's the ladder of investing. Where does your money go? You can start. And I know it might seem small. Maybe you don't have thousands of dollars, but you start off small. Any raise you get, take part of that, put it in here. So now you've got that flywheel turning. Every single month you've got money automatically investing. The stock market, we know on average returns about 7 to 8% per year. That means your money is doubling every approximately 10 years. That becomes phenomenal as you're adding to it. So don't discount yourself. You're in a really good position. And of course, if you want to accelerate that, you can do something on the side when you come home from work or early in the morning. So that's a possibility as well.
Cameron Moore. Oh, this is good. Okay. So he says, if you only had $50, Ramit, lost everything, and had zero influence, how would you get back to where you are now? And I wonder how long you think it would take.
I don't know if my next path would be exactly the same path as I took. So first of all, when I was in college, I remember one of my professors said something to me. He said, I'm really jealous of you students because every quarter you get to erase your life and start over completely fresh. And I didn't really understand what he meant, but think about all the entanglements you now have. You know, you have a house or you live somewhere, you need to show up at this or that. If you could just wipe the slate clean, you might not end up in exactly the same place. Now, you love what you're doing, I love what I'm doing, but I think it's an interesting thought exercise maybe once a year. If I could wipe the slate clean, what would I be doing more of and less of? To answer the question, I would start off by going to everyone who I knew. And again, in this fantasy world, they don't know me, but anyone I know who's doing interesting stuff. And I would briefcase technique the shit out of them. I would come to you, I'd say, oh, I love your videos, da-da-da. Here's some marketing things that I have done in the past that worked really well. In fact, I did one for you. It boosted views by 40%. Love to see if we can set up time to talk, right? And I would do that with everyone else in LA, and I would take one trip out here and knock out like 20 meetings. Boom, I have 3 clients right there. I would do the same thing with writing. I would start writing for people. I would do it for free. I would also get paid. Ultimately, I would also start an email list. This is a huge, huge thing. That's probably the biggest business mistake I made, was not starting an email list early enough. Now we have 400,000 or 500,000 people on that email list, and people buy on email. I would make sure that I started an email list, and I would make sure that I thought about the topics that I was writing about. I write, so that's the kind of way that I communicate with the world. When I started out, I was writing a lot of different stuff, but it was important for me to realize that if you want a business, not just a hobby, you need to be also writing about topics where people want to spend money. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. I had a product that was an abysmal failure called the Scrooge strategy. I showed people who wanted to save money, all these cool techniques, $8 a month. Well, guess what? It turns out people who want to save money don't want to spend money in order to save it. Sort of obvious in retrospect. I would make sure I avoided those mistakes.
All right. I think that's about it. Anything else that you want to add here before we close things up?
I just want to say thank you for having me. And honestly, my favorite part is just hearing how you use the book to create your rich life. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, dude, honestly, like when you reached out, we had a mutual friend to connect us, and I was like, that Ramit? I was like, oh, sick, man, that's amazing. I mean, honestly, your work really did help me out massively early on, and your writing has been super inspiring to so many people I know, so thanks for the work you did.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you took some notes. This might be one that you want to come back to over and over again in the future. I know that I certainly will be. See you next time.